I grew this beer out especially for this movie, especially for Alan. I'm here for you, bro. The Wolfpack is back in their third adventure, and this time there's no party, there's no wedding, there's no actual hangover, so what could go wrong? Well, here's one thing. After the death of his father, Alan is treated to an intervention. On the way to the facility, him, Phil, Stu, Doug get rammed off the road, and Doug disappears once again, only this time he's taken hostage by a man named Marshall, and now it's up to Phil, Stu, and Alan to find Chow, who did Marshall wrong back in the day. It is here where the final installment of the Wolfpack ensues in utter mayhem. And I gotta say, it's actually, it's kind of fun. First off, of course, I'm welcome to the idea that they didn't bring back, one of the biggest pet peeves with The Hangover Part 2 that almost everybody can agree on is the fact that it wasn't even a sequel, it was more of a remake. It was beat for beat the exact same thing as the first movie. Here, they kind of, this is part of their whole marketing ploy, and I understand why they would market the living hell out of this. And that is the fact that this time they're trying to correct the wrongs from the sequel, in which they try to not have any sort of bachelor party. There's no, there's no roofies, there's no drugs, there's no hangover, there's no what the hell happened last night sort of thing. However, the plot is sometimes a little too convenient to the point where it manages to dodge such absence of previous tropes and still managed to do what it did before. Doug is gone for the majority of the movie like he did in the first movie, only this time he's not, missing somewhere. He was actually taken. They know where he is, only this time the person that they're trying to find is Chow. And much like in The Hangover Part 2, Chow plays a bigger role in this whole thing. However, one of the things that I liked about this movie is that Chow, as well as Alan, they were somewhat corrected from the second movie. In the first movie, they served their part well, and Alan was more likable. Chow was the villain, but he was a villain that you actually liked to see on screen, not because he was a likable character, but because you wanted to see what he did next. In Part 2, Alan became a dislikable character, and Chow was just the annoying, Asian guy that was just funny and trying to act urban. Let's go ahead and say that. I don't want to piss some people off. Here, Alan is a little dislikable towards the beginning, especially after the death of his father, but as the movie goes on, he finds himself. This movie is very Alan-centric, but it's Alan-centric in a good way, in which you see him develop as a character and revert back to the way he was in the first movie, where we liked him a little more. And Chow's a little more proactive, he's a little more useful to the story, and he's more than just the annoying guy who's, like I said, trying to act all street and whatever. Granted, that doesn't keep the writers from using him as, like I said, for more of that, lowbrow humor. It's more of that shock humor that, honestly, there's moments where they're obviously going for shock humor in order to just make you peel your eyes back, especially during an end credit scene. And like I said before, Alan has his scenes where he's a bit of an asshole, but they're very minimal compared to how he was in Part 2. Phil and Stu, played by Bradley Cooper and Ed Helms respectively, they're playing the same characters here like they have done with the entire trilogy, and I thought they worked here. You got some returning characters from the previous two movies, you got some new characters to keep things fresh, and Marshall, played by John Goodman, I thought he was actually a pretty cool villain. And speaking of things that were held back, this movie is entitled as a comedy. I'm very surprised because this movie kind of held back a little bit on the comedy and manifested it into becoming more of a dark comedy. There's a lot of death in this movie, more than there was in the first two movies, to the point where the characters react to such death like they would in real life, and it kind of drains the humor a little bit. That's not to say that there were moments that were genuinely funny. I mean, there were moments where I was laughing out loud, but there were other moments where I thought that, like I said, the humor was either shock humor or just humor that just felt like out of place. I felt like they should have been in a family movie rather than an R-rated comedy. And like I said before, the tone gets switched into becoming more of a dark comedy, which involves an awful lot of death and destruction, that sort of thing, to the point where it starts to dip into some mild Oliver Stone territory. But what it lacks in humor makes up for it in, like I said, a really enjoyable ride. There's a moment in the middle of the movie where it kind of defects from the previous two movies and it actually feels a little unique. And at the same time, it had the charm that the first movie had, where you're following these three characters who are kind of, sort of, practically idiots, but you want to see what they do next. You genuinely want to go along for the ride and figure out what's going to lead them to Tijuana or to Vegas, and just figure out what's going to happen next. And I thought they did a really well job tying the story of this one to the previous two. Now granted, the story is treated more in the vein of the Dark Knight trilogy, in which the third movie has more to do with the first movie than the second one. You can skip the second movie completely and still be able to catch up with what's going on, as long as you have seen the first movie. And that's the thing that I liked most about this movie, is that this is the true continuation of the first Hangover movie, and that's what I wanted at a part 2. Because of the fact that it's called part 2, I wanted it to be an actual extension of, you know, the consequences that resided from the events that happened in the first movie. But no, instead we got a rehash. Here, this is an actual continuation. This ties back to the events of the first 2 films and shows the ripple effect of the consequences that happened from those movies. And I like the fact that this is the true part whatever to that first movie. Overall, I thought it was a decent comedy movie, but a very well hangover movie. And it tied the whole trilogy full circle, and I felt that it was a satisfying end to such trilogy. I give The Hangover Part 3 a 7.9 out of 10, which is a C+. A fun, enjoyable little ride, but nothing that I'm gonna be willing to watch again. Thank you guys for watching. Follow me on Twitter, subscribe to my channel for more videos, and I'll see you guys next time.